wake up, turn my alarm clock off by hitting the snooze button for the 10th time. I disable the 6th alarm I've had set from the night before. Get right out of bed, let my dogs out, go and brush my teeth. And I walk myself over to my pantry, grab some breakfast, get started with the day. What is going to motivate us to do certain behaviors? How are we going to define the psychological feelings that result? What do these types of things tell us about ourselves and our personality? Well, we are going to find all of that out in this week's video review. Let's go, baby! How's it going, AP Psych class? We are back for our video review of Unit 7, which is going to be motivation, emotion, and personality. I'm just going to say this right off the bat, this unit has a ton of information. We are going to be looking at a bunch of different theories that are going to explain motivated behaviors, emotions, and our personality. So as always, do not rely solely on these videos as your source of information. Go to your textbook, go onto Google Classrooms and take a look at the PowerPoints, email me. You have a bunch of tools at your disposal. Be sure to use them. The outline for our Unit 7 review is going to be very simple. We're going to start off by taking a look at motivation. We're going to see why we do what we do, and we're also going to take a look at a bunch of different theories that try to explain goal-oriented behavior. Then we're going to move on to emotion, where we're going to take a look at why exactly do emotions occur, and again, we are going to look at the several theories that explain how we experience emotion. And our last topic of discussion is going to be personality. We are going to take a look at what it is that makes you, you. Why did you act that way? What causes that behavior? What motivated you to do that? Have you ever made a questionable decision and someone asked you something along those lines, probably from your parents or a teacher? Motivation is just going to be the psychological process of maintaining goal-oriented behavior. We are going to see that motivation is going to be a lot more than just what motivates me to do my homework or what motivates me to wake up in the morning. We are going to take it much further than that. We are going to see that motivation is going to explain all behaviors that are goal-oriented. So what exactly is going to motivate us to get off the couch to get dinner started? What motivates me to grab a bottle of water during a marathon? The theories of motivation that we're going to take a look at are going to be the drive reduction theory, the incentive theory, the arousal theory, and the humanistic theory. Before we get into these theories, there are a few key ideas and concepts that we do need to understand about motivation. First, we have instincts. Instincts are just going to be complex behaviors that we already know and are unlearned. These are behaviors that are with us from birth. These behaviors can explain some of the instinctual behaviors we have when we're babies, such as the rooting or sucking reflex, which helps keep a baby nourished. Using the instinct theory to explain motivation was very popular in the mid-20th century. However, instincts started to become a fad. Throughout 500 published social science textbooks, researchers found that there were over 5,000 supposed human instincts. That's a lot to keep track of. Another issue with instincts was that they only put a name to a behavior. They were not able to describe that behavior or explain the behavior. When talking about motivation, it can also be either intrinsic or extrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is just going to be your desire to perform an activity for its own sake rather than for some type of external reward. This could be you teaching yourself a new skateboarding trick or just going out and learning about something you find interesting. On the other hand, extrinsic motivation is going to be the desire to perform a behavior or action because you are getting some type of external reward. Going home and studying for the AP Psych test so you can make your parents proud would be That's awful. Why would you study for a test to make your parents proud? They should already be proud for you. I don't know. We'll go with a different example. Going home and studying for the AP Psych test just so you can pass the AP test and get those College Board credits could be an example of extrinsic motivation. Your primary motivation to do well on the test is so you get college credits. It might not be because you want to learn more about psychology, and that's okay. It's not for everyone. Research has shown that individuals with more intrinsic motivators tend to be healthier psychologically. What is going to happen when external rewards are given to intrinsic behaviors? This is actually going to be a concept called the over-justification effect. The over-justification effect is basically going to state that when rewards are given to intrinsic behavior, it might diminish the intrinsic value of that behavior. So eventually, something you used to like to do for the sake of doing it will become something that you might not like to do. Alright, so now that's out of the way, let's take a look at the different theories used to explain motivation. According to psychologist Clark Hull's drive reduction theory, all of our behaviors are going to be motivated by our need to reduce drives. A drive is simply going to be some form of psychological tension that is induced by a biological need. Let's say I just finished up going for a run. My body expended a lot of resources during that run, which is going to take me away from bodily homeostasis. Homeostasis is just going to be our body's tendency to maintain a balanced and constant eternal state. Well, what's going to happen when I am not in bodily homeostasis? Well, remember, my hypothalamus, which was responsible for our 4 F's of fleeing, fighting, feeding, and mating, will send a message to my body saying that I am in need of water. Then I become thirsty. My thirst is going to be a drive, and to reduce that drive, I drink the water. This will bring me back to bodily homeostasis. My need for water led to my drive for thirst, and to reduce that drive, I was motivated to go and get a glass of water and drink it. Not only are we going to be pushed by our needs to reduce these drives, we are also going to be pulled by incentives. While drives are inborn, incentives are going to be based off of learned behaviors. Incentives are generally linked to secondary reinforcers such as money. When asked why he was going to climb Mount Everest, British mountaineer George Mallory simply stated, "Because it's there." Unfortunately for Mallory, him and his climbing partner both died 800 feet from the summit of Mount Everest during their expedition in the 1920s. It's unknown whether Mallory and his partner made it to the summit and they were on their decline, or if they passed away trying to reach the top. But what exactly motivated this behavior to try and climb the mountain in the first place? Why risk one's own life by climbing up dangerous terrain, or driving a car 100 miles per hour, or even jumping out of a plane? Research has shown that even when all of our biological needs are met, we as humans still feel driven to experience some form of stimulation. Every person is going to have a different level of optimal arousal. When we are below our optimal arousal level, we will become bored and look for ways to increase it. When we are above it, we experience stress and somehow try and tone it down a bit. The Yerkes-Dodson law says that there is a peak level of arousal where we are at optimal performance. This only lasts to a certain point, as too much arousal can lead to a decrease in performance. And for our last theory of motivation, we are going to take a look at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. On your screen, you see that we have our hierarchy of needs. According to Maslow, all of our needs at the bottom of the pyramid have to be met before we make our way to the top. In order for us to build loving relationships, we need to have a sense of safety in our environment. For us to feel a sense of safety in our environment, we have to have all of our physical needs met. Think about it. Someone who is extremely hungry might go out of their comfort zone to obtain food, maybe by even stealing it. There are even stories of individuals who were locked in concentration camps during World War II who would have their food stolen by them from their family or loved ones. At the top of Maslow's hierarchy, we have self-actualization. According to Maslow, not everyone is going to reach this stage. It is at this point that an individual believes they have lived up to their fullest potential. It is important to know that you can be knocked around Maslow's stages throughout your life. Imagine we have an individual at the esteem level. What do you think would happen to them if they found out that their house was broken into? Chances are this individual may no longer feel safe in their home, taking away from their safety needs. According to Maslow, this individual would now need to construct a sense of safety before going back up to the esteem level. Why do we experience happiness when we get a good grade on a test? Or why do we experience anger when someone does something that we don't like? Where exactly do these feelings come from, and what causes them to occur? In psychological terms, emotions are just going to be responses that occur from physiological arousal, expressive behavior, and conscious experience. For the first three theories we go over, I'm going to provide a simple stimulus with the purpose of creating a fear response. I want you to imagine that you are walking through the beautiful Australian wilderness when out of nowhere a drop bear plunges to the ground from the tree above you. So our primary emotion here is obviously going to be fear. But psychologists disagree with the process and how we experience this fear. Psychologist William James took a backwards approach on how we experience emotion. In his research, Principles of Psychology, published in 1890, James stated that we feel sorry because we cry, angry because we strike, and afraid because we tremble. According to the James Lang theory, we would look up and see our stimulus, which is the drop bear. We then would experience some form of physiological arousal. For this situation, we're just going to go with a pounding heart. And finally, this leads us to experiencing our emotion of fear. Again, James is saying that we are experiencing these emotions as a result of the physiological arousal occurring in our body. Psychologist Walter Cannon was not the biggest fan of the James Lang theory. Cannon is going to go ahead and propose his own theory on how we experience and interpret emotions. His major argument against the James Lang theory was that our body responses were not distinct enough to evoke different emotions. For instance, an increased heart rate is a common response for multiple different emotions. Cannon is going to team up with psychologist Philip Bard to create the Cannon-Bard theory. The Cannon-Bard theory states that we experience emotion and the physiological arousal simultaneously. So with the drop bear coming down towards us, our heart's going to begin pounding and we are going to experience the emotion of fear. One is not going to necessarily cause the other. Cannon and Bard stated that the emotionally triggering stimuli is going to go to your brain's cortex as well as the sympathetic nervous system. In your brain's cortex, we have that subjective experience of emotion, while our sympathetic nervous system is going to trigger our physiological arousal. What is going to be the connection to what we think and how we feel? Most psychologists today all agree that cognition is going to play a big role in our experiencing of emotions. Stanley Schachter is going to propose his two-factor theory, or if you like things that rhyme, you can call it the Schachter two-factor theory. Schachter agreed with James on the idea that our emotions stem from our awareness of our body's physiological arousal. Schachter also agreed with Cannon and Bard that some emotional responses are physiologically similar. Schachter is going to conclude that an emotional experience requires a conscious interpretation of the arousal. Looking back at our original stimulus, Schachter would say that we would experience a pounding heart, and we will assign a cognitive label of fear to the pounding heart. This causes us to experience fear. Another theory of emotion worth knowing is going to be Richard Lazarus's cognitive appraisal theory. Lazarus's theory basically states that when we go through a stressful event, we have a cognitive appraisal of that event. During this appraisal, we determine whether this is going to be a threatening stimuli or a challenging stimuli. If it's a stressful stimuli, it can lead to several stress-related emotions. If you look at it as a challenge, you become focused and alert and even more determined. When on the topic of stress, it is very important to mention Hans Selye's general adaptation syndrome, which is Selye's three-phase theory on the human stress response. Let's say you suddenly experience some form of emotional trauma, like, I don't know, getting attacked by a dog. According to Selye, we first go into the alarm phase due to the activation of our fight or flight response. Your body is preparing to defend itself against the stressor. In phase 2, the resistance stage, we are learning to cope with the stressor. However, our blood pressure and breathing remain high, and tons of hormones are being circulated through our bloodstream. During phase 3, our bodies are depleted of the necessary resources used to deal with stress. In this phase, you are more prone to stress-related illnesses and even in extreme cases, death. The last emotion theory we are going to mention is going to be the facial feedback hypothesis. Psychologist Paul Ekman's research on microexpressions led him to theorize the facial feedback hypothesis. This theory basically states that our facial expressions can trigger an emotional response. So if you're unhappy, just try smiling for 30 seconds to brighten your mood. You may have heard the expression, "you have a nice personality," or maybe you haven't. You know, if you haven't, you might want to take a look into making some personal changes. Kidding, of course. But what exactly do people mean when they say that to someone? What exactly determines our personality? Personality is just going to be our unique pattern of consistent thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. One of the older, first established theories on personality is going to be Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theory. Remember, the psychoanalytical theory places a huge emphasis on the unconscious mind as well as childhood experience. In Freud's theory, our mind is separated into 3 separate parts. We are going to have the conscious mind, which are just going to be things that we are currently aware of. We are also going to have our pre-conscious mind. These are going to be things that we can pull into conscious awareness. So these are like our memories being stored in our long-term memory system. We're not always consciously aware of them, but they are there. And lastly, we have the largest part of our mind, and it is going to be the unconscious mind. There is no conscious awareness of any of the material stored in the unconscious mind. This is where all of our repressed wishes and dreams are going to be held, even troubled thoughts or feelings. According to Freud, glimpses of our unconscious mind can be seen in Freudian slips as well as dreams. Freud even goes as far to say that dreams are considered the royal road to the unconscious mind. Freud's theory of personality is going to contain 3 personality systems. We're going to have the id, the ego, and the superego. From birth, we have our id, which is going to be the completely unconscious component of personality. The id is ruled by the pleasure principle and demands immediate satisfaction. Tensions are reduced when satisfactions of the id are met. The id is going to be driven by all of our instinctual behaviors in order to avoid pain and seek pleasure. The id is the very irrational and self-centered aspect of our personalities. As we age, our ego forms. Your ego is partially conscious and partially unconscious. The ego's job is going to be to mediate our instinctual urges with societal rules and expectations. Instinctual demands are going to come from the id, while our expectations are held within the superego. The last aspect of personality to form, the superego develops as a result of parental expectations and societal rules. The superego is mainly unconscious, but it does have some conscious aspects. For example, that little voice in your head telling you not to do something because it's probably not a smart thing to do. The superego brings out feelings of inferiority, guilt, and anxiety when demands are not met. If you have ever seen The Emperor's New Groove, aka one of the greatest movies ever made, you may remember this scene where Kronk is contemplating whether or not he should save Kuzco as Kuzco is nearing a very big waterfall. An angel and devil appear on Kronk's shoulder, debating the proper course of action. Freud's theory of personality is very similar to this. You could almost look at the id as the devil and the superego as the angel. The ego is going to be Kronk because he has to ultimately decide what he is going to do based on the information that both his id and superego are providing. When the ego becomes overwhelmed with threats that it's unable to control, it will start to experience anxiety. According to Freud, we are all constantly at a battle with anxiety, doing whatever we can to avoid it. Ego defense mechanisms are going to operate unconsciously, and they're going to distort, falsify, and deny reality in order to reduce anxiety. While Freud had several far-fetched theories, his overall premise of psychoanalysis intrigued several psychologists. The Neo-Freudians are going to be a group of psychologists who believed in the importance of the unconscious mind as well as childhood experiences in development in determining personality, but they did not agree with a lot of Freud's other views, such as his pessimistic view on human nature and the idea that all behaviors are motivated by sexual urges. I'm just going to talk about 3 major Neo-Freudians that you guys probably need to know about for the AP test. Alfred Adler is going to be a Neo-Freudian who believes that all of our psychological problems stem from a feeling of inferiority. Carl Jung is going to reject Freud's assertion that all of human behavior is directed by sex and aggression. On top of a personal unconscious, Jung also believed that all humans contain a collective unconscious. This is just going to be the part of our unconscious mind that contains ancestral memories and experiences and is common to all humankind. Part of the collective unconscious are archetypes, which are just common themes found in all cultures. Things like a nurturing mother or a hero's journey. I'm sure your English teachers will like that one. And our last Neo-Freudian that we are going to talk about is going to be Karen Horney. Horney is going to believe that childhood experiences play a huge role in our development, but she also believes that social relationships play a much larger role in our personality development rather than sexual ones, which Freud originally hypothesized. While a very intriguing theory of personality, the psychoanalytical theory is not the only theory out there that attempts to explain our personality. I'm not going to go over each one in too much detail, so if any of these seem a little confusing to you, it's probably a good idea to go and review them in your textbook or on Google Classrooms in the review section. Albert Bandura is going to use his social cognitive theory and apply it to personality development. Bandura came up with the idea of reciprocal determinism, which basically states that a person's behavior is going to be both influenced by and influences personal factors and the environment. Let's say I develop an interest in playing ice hockey. That would be my cognition. This leads me to join a local ice hockey team, which would be my environment. As a result, I would spend more time talking to and hanging out with my hockey team. This will just go and strengthen my interest in hockey. You can kind of see it's almost like the recycle symbol. It just keeps on going on and around, and it continues to strengthen that original behavior. Bandura also stated that a sense of self-efficacy was important in how we regulate our lives. A high sense of self-efficacy just means that we believe we have the skills and resources needed to be successful in life. Trait theorists are going to be primarily interested in the measurement of personality traits. Personality traits are just going to be habitual patterns of behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. Among popular trait theories, we have Gordon Allport's trait theory, Hans Eysenck's personality dimensions, Raymond Cattell's 16 personality factors, and the Big 5 personality factors. There are 2 major assessment techniques used in assessing personality. We have both projective tests and objective tests, which are also known as self-report tests. A projective test is just going to be when the tester reveals some ambiguous stimuli to the person being tested and the individual just reports what they see, think, or feel. Projective tests are going to be very subjective, but they do give us a lot of information about personality. An example of a projective test would be Hermann Rorschach's ink blot test. And yes, this is a picture of Swiss psychiatrist Hermann Rorschach in the 1900s, not Brad Pitt. Self-report tests are going to be more of a traditional type of assessment. In a self-report test, the test taker answers a variety of questions by choosing a selected response. Data is collected, and at the end of the test, a personality profile is created. These tests tend to show a higher level of reliability and validity over projective tests. I could have sworn I turned this thing off. My bad, guys. Hey guys, I'm real sorry, something actually just came up. I'm gonna have to hop out real quick, so I'm just gonna send you on over to the FRQ. I'll be right back. Really sorry about that interruption right there, guys. Anyways, be sure to submit those FRQs to Google Classroom by Friday. Until next time.